Brooklyn Independent Television.
Please take a seat. I'm going to introduce you a little further since you have such amazing biographies. Since 2009, Councilmember Stephen Levin has represented the 33rd District of Brooklyn, which covers Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Park Slope, Boream Hill, Brooklyn Heights, Dumbo, and Vinegar Hill. He came to Bushwick, Brooklyn to work as a community organizer after he graduated from Brown University, and he led a number of programs. One was a program that helped to relocate families of lead-poisoned children out of hazardous apartments. He was also the director of an anti-predatory lending program, and he organized homeowners through community workshops and grassroots outreach and warned them against the dangers of subprime mortgages. In 2006, he became chief of staff to Assemblymember Vito Lopez and secured funding for over 1,000 units of affordable housing. Mindy S. Tarlow, as I mentioned, is the chief executive officer and executive director of the Center for Employment Opportunities. And she began her association with CEO as a program director at the Vera Institute of Justice in 1994. Prior to joining CEO, she spent close to 10 years in the city's Office of Management and Budget, where she guided many criminal justice projects, including the co-authoring of the mayor's Safe Streets, Safe City Omnibus Criminal Justice Program. She's on the executive committee of the National Transitional Jobs Network and the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. She also served on the mayor's Commission for Economic Opportunity. In addition to wearing all of these hats, she's an adjunct professor at New York University's Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. You're a very busy person. Barron Johnson is 24 years old and lives in the Bronx with his family. He is the father of 4 young daughters who he says are the world to me, very smart and very respectful. He graduated from the Life Skills Education Program at CEO, and he's currently employed full-time. He also graduated from the GED class, which is a new opportunity that CEO is offering to young adults. He's currently enrolled in the sanitation training program. And last but not least, former BPL alum Nicholas Higgins is the supervising correctional services librarian at the New York Public Library, and he provides weekly mobile book service on Rikers Island, as well as library consulting at 6 New York State and 2 federal correctional facilities. He coordinates early literacy and book reading sessions to mothers and babies in the nursery unit at Rikers Island. He also conducts library orientation workshops to adult inmates and is currently revamping the library of a detention center for teen girls with library school interns from the Pratt Institute. Each year, Mr. Higgins edits and publishes a re-entry resource guide called Connections for people coming back to New York City from prison. Welcome all of our panelists. Thank you very much. So, Ms. Tarlow, I just have to know, as if it weren't evident enough through this great film, what's so special about CEO?
Well, yeah, I think it's pretty hard to compete with those incredible stories. But I do think the thing that's the most unique about CEO is that we only do one thing with one group of people. We only focus on the employment needs of people with criminal records, and that's very unusual. But it's even more unusual how we do it, which is that we intervene immediately upon release. And we guarantee each person who comes through our doors a job as soon as they come home. And what that does, and what makes us special, is that we're intervening at the most important time, when people want to work the most, when they need to work the most, when the consequences of not working are the gravest, and unfortunately, when it's the hardest time to find a job. So what we do is we say, well, let's try to fix that. Let's try to guarantee somebody immediate employment for immediate pay during those first few vulnerable months after release from prison. So we can provide the opportunity that people want and need in the right way at the right time. And I think that is what makes us so special, and that's what's helped us help so many people become crime-free, become employed, return to their families, their communities, and their neighborhoods in ways that helps all of us, not just them and their families, but all of us, because it creates a safer environment for all of us, and importantly, in these tough economic times, it more than pays for itself. So for every dollar you spend on CEO, there are $4 saved. And in this day and age, I would suggest that's a pretty important thing to know and something that makes us really special.
So you say that you intervene immediately upon their release. How do you come in contact with them? How do you know that they are coming up for release?
Well, we have a very strong partnership with the State Division of Correctional and Community Service that has all of the parole offices, and that's another thing that's really important about how we do what we do, is we see parole as a partner in the community, a partner in trying to help people coming home from prison turn their lives around through work. So we really get our referrals from parole. We go to parole bureaus to recruit people, and we take referrals from parole officers. And I think that's a very important partnership to have, especially during those early days after release.
Mr. Johnson, if I can ask you how you found CEO and just talk a little bit about how it helped you.
I found CEO through another participant. We happened to be at parole, and I was talking about the fact that, I was frustrated that I didn't have a job. And he had told me about a program that he was in, where they gave him a job and he was able to make a couple dollars to help him get by. And I asked him about it. He gave me the information, and then I went through with my parole officer, and he sent me down to Broadway, and that's where it began.
And how has having a job been helpful to you in the reentry process?
Wow, it's been helpful. I mean, I've been able to, take care of myself. It's like, it's good when you have family that if you need something, you could depend on them. But it's like after a while, you get tired of asking somebody.
Sure.
You don't want to be a burden to anybody anymore. So it's like it feels better when you can take care of yourself. This way, no one can tell you how to spend your money, what you should do, and it's your opinion, on what you do with your money.
That's great. Nick, I want to ask you about your work. And how have you seen books and literacy classes change lives in the prison environment where you've worked?
Well, first of all, I think that I have no anxiety about the death of the book or anything like that where I work. It seems to be sort of a pervasive theme throughout libraries these days. But how it changes lives, I think that, first and foremost, I think that the cornerstone of the mission of a public library is to serve everyone, no matter where they happen to be. And I have no doubt that we're serving the mission of that every day when we go out to Rikers Island 3 days out of the week. We visit state facilities all the time. And there's no doubt in my mind that people appreciate the services, because there is no real services or access to general reading material at these facilities. And how it changes lives. The early literacy workshops that I run with fathers out at Rikers Island, you can see a change in people's attitudes almost from day one to day 4. Guys walking into the classroom, 12 of them, very closed off, as guys tend to be anyway. And you talk all this talk about being able to communicate with your children through active reading with them, books like Dora the Explorer, or Kylan and things like this that they're not really familiar with. And then toward the end of the program, by day 4, everybody has their guards down. Grown men, doing the voice of Boots the monkey. It's incredible, and it's more for the children when you see them come into the family day that we have at the last session, and their children's being able to share in that experience with their fathers is very, it's great. It's wonderful.
That's amazing. Councilman Levin, I'm gonna jump to you. And as I mentioned before in your introduction, you've been an advocate for affordable housing throughout your career. And I just want to, as I was doing a little bit of research for tonight's panel, I came across some data. It's from 2004, so it's a little bit old, but it really surprised me. And so listen to this. More than 10% of those coming in and out of prisons or jails are homeless in the months before their incarceration. And recent studies in New York City, again, this is in 2004, reveal that more than 30% of single adults entering shelters under the Department of Homeless Services are persons recently released from city and state correctional institutions. And many of these individuals continue to cycle between incarceration and shelters. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to any hurdles that people with criminal convictions might face as they try to get affordable housing, or any kind of experience you've had with that.
Well, I think that there's a tremendous number of hurdles. If you look holistically at individuals that are coming out of incarceration, where CEO has been able to take up a lot of the employment aspects, and other organizations as well, but where CEO has focused on really bringing that aspect to the forefront and addressing it quickly, as Mindy said, and really, the first day starting a new chapter. I don't believe that the city has really taken on the issue of housing as effectively. There are the issues are kind of greater than just those coming out of incarceration. We have an affordable housing crisis in the city that continues to get worse and not better, and it has to do with just the amount available. But then the issues of incarceration, an individual with a prior history of incarceration could very well impact when you have to come up with pay stubs, and you have to come up with the pretty rigorous process by which individuals are able to access the limited amount of resources when it comes to affordable housing. And the problem, what you get when you don't have an infrastructure in place is that you have bad actors coming on the scene. So in my district, and I know it's existing in other districts, you have kind of what's called three-quarters houses. And I'll just give you an example of what one institution that sprung up in my district and has actually since had their license revoked from the state OASIS, which is the Office of Substance Abuse on the state level. There's an organization that did drug counseling, and they were able to get a contract on a very large building in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, which is where I represent. And they were able to get, their funding was based on Medicaid reimbursements. And partially on Medicaid reimbursements, and then for the shelter, the city, HRA, which is the Human Resources Administration, pays what's called a shelter allowance. Everybody's entitled to what's called a shelter allowance, and so there's a group that was called CIS, and they would recruit individuals coming out of incarceration facilities and offer to put them up in really what was substandard conditions, way over capacity in rooms, and not a good living situation. And I got to know a lot of these individuals because I would meet them at the local soup kitchen. Now, what happened was that they went into then, CIS would recruit them into their drug treatment programs, whether or not they had a drug condition, whether or not they were using drugs at all, or whether they had any preconditions related to drug use at all. And they would say, well, I don't use drugs. Well, you have to go into the drug program. And then they would get the Medicaid reimbursements, and that's how they were getting their funding. As soon as the Medicaid reimbursements ran out, they would move to evict these individuals from that facility, and then they were back out fending for themselves and trying to find shelter. That happens throughout the city, but that is as a result of the fact that we don't have a comprehensive infrastructure to deal with the housing issue. So the reality is that it's something that is it's part of a larger picture of housing and affordable housing in New York City, but without specifically addressing it and coming up with a real solution, we're going to see this type of thing happen again and again.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to respond to how you?
Yeah, I nodding my head in agreement. There are so many issues that folks are facing in the city and throughout the state. The overlap of substance abuse issues, housing issues, work issues, they're really the big three, if you will. And I agree that, in some ways, it really takes a soul singular focus on one of those issues to really bring it home and to really serve a lot of people well, but you need to coordinate with other services and other providers that are addressing those other critical needs, because all three of them are really critical to people's successful reentry. And I also agree that there's a little bit of overuse because of financial reasons of substance abuse slots, if you will. You know, it doesn't matter if you're using or not, you have to go here because it's all that's available. And I think that that's just not a really good use of resources.
To your knowledge, is there an organization that focuses on housing issues for formerly incarcerated people?
Well, yes, and you know, one of the things about New York is I really believe we have one of the best reentry infrastructures probably in the world. There are a number of colleague organizations that those of us at CEO work very closely with that are multi-service agencies that focus on housing and drugs and health and employment. There are others that focus exclusively on drug treatment or exclusively on housing. And I think we work together in sort of a 360-degree way to at least try for the thousands that we serve, which feels like a lot to us,
right.
But there are thousands and thousands of others that go underserved. I think we really do try to take a comprehensive approach and support each other and be mutually reinforcing instead of falling all over each other at every turn.
Sure. Can people families of currently incarcerated people or formerly incarcerated people reach out to CEO to try to get their family members who are coming out of prison services or?
Yes, actually, you know, for some reason, my direct phone number is out there, you know. I don't exactly know how that happened, but it did. So every once in a while, I get a call from a father, a mother, a sister, a brother, and I always stop what I'm doing, talk to that person. If they're in New York and they're on parole, I say, get that person's parole officer to call us directly. Here's somebody specifically that they can reach out to. Because I honestly believe if every mother, father, sister, and brother made that phone call to a place like CEO, we would be in a whole different situation.
I'm sure. Do you want to respond?
Yeah, can I say something too for all the librarians out here too? The library is a good place to sort of connect people with these resources. Like Mindy was saying, there is a fairly robust reentry community in New York City, more than any other places in the country, I think. And people sometimes use the library as the place where they go to first. It might be the most visible public service agency in their neighborhood. I like to think it's one of the more friendly public service agencies out there, although we probably have a lot of work to do in that area too. But the point is people are coming into the library looking for these services, and we should be able to position ourselves as information sort of specialists in order to connect personal phone calls to Mindy or other people, actually connecting with people.
Right.
And Baron, you might agree with this. You can speak to this too. But having somebody answer on the other line and connecting with somebody in person is very important, especially at a critical time when you're coming back into the community. And that's probably why I give your number out so much, Mindy. Sorry about that.
So the mystery is solved. Now we're going to send them to Steve's office,
Exactly.
right? You get a constituent calls, right,
That's
Steve?
right. Absolutely.
Baron, I hope it's not too personal, but I wonder if you'll share with us, like, what was the hardest part of reintegrating with your family and your community and society in general?
Not knowing what to expect. It's like, basically with my kids, it's like, even with, my kid's mother, my family, it's like, I haven't been around in a while. So it's like, when I left, everything, the rules and the way things was going was one way. And then it's like, who are you to come home and start saying, no, don't do this and go this way and go that way, So it was like, I was more of like in a back seat, for a while. I really didn't say much, just pretty much whatever happened, I just, let it go. I didn't, I tried not to get mad at anything people did to me because it was like, I felt like maybe I was overreacting because of where I came from. It's like, in jail, you take everything so personal because, the inmates, the COs, the counselors that, pretend to be there to help, they make everything personal. They just like, okay, you got a felony, or you in jail, you an animal, you this, you that. So it's like every time somebody say something to you that's like disrespectful, it's like it feels derogatory. It's like your guards is up, So it's like everything my family said, I just tried to ignore. So it's like I kind of like didn't deal with them as much, I was home, but I still had the jail mentality, I felt more comfortable being in my room by myself and listening to music by myself. Just I didn't really, want to be around people,
And that just started to change with time, or did you have other support?
I'm still working on it now. It's like I get sometimes, when I feel sad or I feel like I'm going through something, I just like to be by myself because that's all I've known. It's like, so it's hard for me to come to somebody and just sit down and talk to you and, say, look, I'm going through this. This is what's bothering me. This is what I had on my mind, because for 5 years I didn't have that. Who would I go and tell for 5 years, that, oh, look, this happened, my bird died or my hamster, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it was none of that, So it's like, man up, and that's what I had to do. So it's like, I still have that mentality sometimes.
Did you read any books while you were?
Yeah, actually, yeah, the books, thanks for the books. But, the books were good. I mean, before, I got locked up, I read books in school and stuff like that. But for the most part, you got video games, you got TV, where you can get this information much faster. So who wants to read a book? But one thing that made me mad with the book was I finally, I was in my cell, and, I got in some trouble, got into a fight. So they put me on lockdown for like 23 hours a day. So it's like pretty much just me and my cell talking to my thoughts. And a librarian came around with some books. So, I said, what? Normally he would come around and I would just pay him no mind. It's just that annoying cardigan because it made a lot of noise. So I finally took a book off, and it was a real thick book. And I started reading it, and it got real interesting to where I wanted to finish it. And it was like 30 pages missing. So I was like, damn. So it's like, after that, I just, I tried to refrain away from books. I didn't want to read them more. So.
Do you remember what the title was? Maybe some of us have read it. We can tell you.
No, it was by, I think it was the Four Horsemen or something like that.
Four Horsemen.
Yeah, by
have
James
it here.
Patterson.
Oh, okay.
Like that, yeah, so.
Afterward, I bet
Yeah,
somebody.
so it was like, so. But after that, it was pretty cool.
That's great. I know you have to run, and you don't really have to answer this question, but have they ever cut the prison budget? Has that ever happened?
Well, yeah. The reality is yes.
Okay.
The city had a very ambitious plan to revamp the entire jail system in New York City. They had to scale back on that significantly. I don't know the exact number, but we're talking probably $500 million is what they did, or more. But what we are seeing is, it's funny because the first time that I met Mindy was when I was actually campaigning in her neighborhood, and we had a discussion. And it was probably, she was on her way to work, and I was out handing out flyers about the jail reopening in the Brooklyn House of Detention on Atlantic Avenue, which isn't too far from here. And she asked me what my position on it was, and I said that, well, I'm not against it reopening, which was kind of an unpopular position. The majority of the neighbors around there, and the politically expedient position would be, I never want to see that thing reopen again. But the value in it reopening is that it is, it's better for the families of those that are incarcerated. B, it's better for those that are incarcerated. C, it is better for the city of New York, both on a fiscal perspective, because it's cheaper than transferring people back and forth to Rikers, and lastly, that I think it's important that we have jails in the middle of, in the town square, so that we're not, all too often there's an out of sight, out of mind, and without facilities that are in our neighborhoods and in the downtown, and it makes perfect sense because it's right next to the courts. It's better for us as a society, I think, to have to be able to recognize it and see it and touch it and know that it's your neighbor and know that it's not something that you can block out or that you can vilify.
Well, and he had no idea who I was. I didn't introduce myself as, hi, I run a program for people coming out of prison. My assumption was that he thought I was a concerned, neighbor and citizen. And I said, I just want to know what your position is on the Brooklyn jail. And he said exactly what he just said. And I stuck my hand out and said, you just got my vote. And I walked down the stairs and got on the subway to work.
That's great. Did you need to leave us now, or?
Unfortunately, I do.
Okay.
I do
Thank
want
you
to
so much.
Thank you so much.
I thank Meredith and everyone on the panel and the Brooklyn Public Library, Linda, for hosting. This has been a wonderful experience.
The panel's going to continue, but we're just saying goodbye to Councilman Levin
And
right
Sam,
now.
I want to thank Sam.
I think at the highest level, what I always say is we're not part of the economic problem. We're part of the economic solution. If you want to save money, you should invest in CEO. If you want to have better parks and better sanitation and better higher education, you should invest in CEO. Why? Because investing in CEO is a whole lot cheaper than the alternative, which is keeping somebody in prison. And I'm so excited that finally, a couple of weeks ago, the federal government released a study of CEO that proved that for every dollar spent, we're saving almost $4
Incredible.
in the city and in the state in incarceration costs, and also in the value, the very value of the transitional work that we do. And you saw a lot of those photos in the multimedia presentation that we made. That's real. So we feel so strongly about that. And even to the question which I think you were getting at before, and I get this question a lot, well, hang on a second. You know, my son just graduated from high school and he can't find a job and he didn't commit a felony, so what the heck? You know, why is your client getting a job and my son can't get a job? And I would say, you know, I completely appreciate that, ma'am, but I would pull the camera back a little bit and not look at this issue in a vacuum, because if you invest in me, if the person who's your son's classmate who got in trouble and went to prison and just got home, if that young man had not gone to prison, we would have more money all around to do all sorts of things to improve the communities in which we live. So you can't really look at it as an isolated thing. You have to look at what it means for our communities, both in terms of economics, but also in terms of public safety. By investing in CEO and by getting that individual a job, we're making safer communities, healthier communities, and more economically viable communities for everyone. Not just for my client, but for everyone. And it really matters, and it should matter to you as much as it matters to me.
Well, I think we should wrap up here soon, because I'm sure we'll have lots of questions from the audience. But I just want to ask Mr. Johnson, what advice or words of encouragement you might have for people who are, you know, just out of jail, or their families. Like, just what can you say?
There's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel, man. Like, don't give up. Don't let people tell you, you know, it's impossible to do anything. You know, a lot of times people will tell you that because you have a felony, it's over. And let me tell you, it's not over, because, you know, a lot of people say, you know, having a felony, you can't do sanitation. Well, when I leave here, I'm going to throw some garbage tonight. So if you see me by your area, you know. Now, besides that, you know, I'm in class right now. I'm training to be an EMT, a medical technician.
That's great.
You know, and a lot of people say you can't do that with a felony. You know, it's just a lot of things people say you can't do. Don't give up. You know, it's not what you can't do, it's what you won't do if you don't do the research. And that's what I do, you know, day and night. I'm on my computer. If I'm not there, you know, I'm at CEO asking questions. And don't ever be afraid to ask a question. You know, people think, oh, that was a stupid question. If you don't know, it's not a stupid question. You know, so if you feel you want advice, just ask. And like I said, keep the faith.
Mm.
Watch this and other Brooklyn Independent Television episodes online at bricartsmedia.org/BIT.